Wonderful. My name is Ann Fisher. Thanks for having me here. I'm going to read one of my poems. The angle of incidence is equal to the angle of refraction. A woman's mind should never be in the gutter, or so they say. Not a chalked cue end on a slate pool table, lining up that shit-sure shot, lingering too long at no knees, that murky bar straddling the corner, where the moniker stands in for allowed to let yourself go, allowed to put your quarters down, anting yourself in, worthy, the game of angles and drop pocket knocks, backspin, ricochets, lean long across your table. Where then should the proper gal let her mind wander, if not the high balls or lows, vast felted expanse shooting across that green? The bottom of a stew pot, perhaps? Some pinprick stitch hole of a husband's happy hem? Certainly not, we answer. Call the shot, drop the 8-ball, clean. Yeah, great. My first answer is, well, I don't. I'm really a prose writer. I'm just struggling to find a plot line. My words often get rabbit-holed into the emotion of a singular moment, and I find that sometimes that's too deep for most prose. So I kind of dug myself into poems, and I'm hunkering down here for a while and really enjoying it. I find writing is kind of like stomping a shovel blade into rooted perennials, and it turns over my anxieties, and I find these hardy, twisted thoughts fierce to put up shoots. So my diving board into writing is like obsession and emotion, and the writing itself is a way to turn those ruminations over to find the roots of the thing, a way to sort through my underbrush, if you will. And poetry kind of found me there with my shovel ready. I like the brevity of the line. I love the stanza, how they encapsulate so much with so little. So I really started writing poetry because in my prose I tended to overdo it. And expanding to poetry has really helped me carve crisper images out of all those twisted thoughts. Kind of like all my writing, they're about moments and obsessions. I went to the ocean with my daughter on a writing retreat, and she spoke those words. She put the question out between us, maybe the salt is sleeping. Because the absence of what we both expected from the ocean and came out there, and it made me think about expectations in general, and about how we overlay the world and each other with this film of what we think things should be. And the cost and the angle of incidence are also steeped in expectations. The cultural desires placed on the forms we label woman and man. The cost rose out of my longtime need to use physical activity to ground me, to survive eating disorders, also to find my center in that pumping blood, the muscles, and survive the cultural norm and expectations of whittling myself away to nothing. I grew up hearing that women are supposed to take up less space, hold their tongues, fit a mold that someone's made for them by others. And the cost is kind of the path down that forced road. The body is something to be tamed and starved and diminished, and yet there's survival of that. So I wanted to cross those two ideas, the power to diminish and the power to build in that poem. The angle of incidence arrived from a moment when I was playing pool with a group of friends, men and women, and the sound of the game and the laughter and the intensity just stuck with me. The way we held each other as equals around the table. And I started to think about the game itself and how it's a game kind of with a dark history, kind of othered. You don't see pool tables set up in schools, or the game isn't taught in PE, for instance, and why not? It's such a mathematical game. It's physics and the rules of motion, and that's kind of where the title came from. But our culture's kind of othered the game. It's held it out as like, oh, it's a sketchy way to spend your time, and yet we sort of admire those people who are good at it too, more than sort of. So the pool table is another place where our culture of gender and othering plays out. And I wanted to capture the sounds of the game, the intelligence of it, alongside the power of those who aren't usually expected or invited to the table. this one because it frightens me, being a new poet. But I guess the piece that comes through is write down whatever it is in your head or heart, even if it makes you feel cringy. The raw stuff is it's the best to work with, but it's often that content that I know I feel the most tender about or vulnerable. So I think if you feel like you're a snail racing for the protection of a shell as you write, then I think you're on good poetry ground. And then find a writing group or a person to workshop your writing. I owe so much to my writing groups and writing partners out there who help me do the work of refining my raw material into the shape of a poem or story or essay that speaks in the voice I want it to. This might go counter to teachers, but once I took a class on education and mindfulness, and the teacher broke through all my reading phobias because she just said, read until you have what you need and then stop. And it's a bit edgy because I know as a writer I want people to read the whole thing, but I really live by this piece of advice, because if you read a poem until you have what you need and you find either one blossoming thought or an emotion that is triggered inside you, or a reaction or a line you just want to repeat over and over, either because you don't understand it or because you're drawn into it, I think that's so rich. And sometimes that means you might not read past the title of a poem, or it might mean you read the poem over and over again. Cut it out and put it over your desk. I often hand copy poems or lines that I like, and even ones that I dislike too, onto paper, because I like to feel the rhythm of the words, like I'm holding a wild bird carefully in my hands and trying to understand where it came from. So Ocean Vuong comes to my mind as one of my current favorite writers. I love how he defies genres. His novel On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous, it reads like a prose poem. It's lyric, it's beautiful, it's haunting and raw and yet hopeful. The title alone is one of those lines I want to hold in my hand and keep discovering its heartbeat. His poems are the same. They capture images that reverberate through me and out into the world, so I just really enjoy reading him. I feel so grateful to so many people who've guided me. I certainly appreciate Samjoko for finding a home for my poems. And also I work with some groups here in Vermont, so the Addison County writers have been crucial to my writing, and author, poet, and artist Lily Henriksen's awesome. Check her out.